I'm so honored that our next speaker took time out of his busy, and this dude is busy, schedule. He's not only our Auditor General, also has a very strong Twitter game. I suggest you follow him. And as you know, game recognized game. You can follow me at John E. Wetzel, at John E. Wetzel. Sorry. But seriously, the first time I met General DePasquale, he was actually a representative. And I'll never forget this. I was in the Judiciary Committee, and we were pushing the first reform package in Pennsylvania in 2012. The reform package, by the way, that resulted in a reduction of our population since that time of 2,000 less inmates, right? So he was on the committee, and he spoke up, and I was stunned. Because in my head, when I hear children of incarcerated parent, I have a picture. But what he said is, not only do I support this legislation, not only is this good legislation, but it's the right thing to do. And I have a different perspective because my dad was incarcerated, and I was stunned. And so when we planned this, the first name that jumped into my head was to get General DePasquale out here. The only problem was he was running for re-election. So I was nervous about the timing. He was elected first in 2013 as the Auditor General. He's done a great job in a partisan world. He's loved by the right and the left. Unless he's auditing you, then you don't love him. But after the audit, you love him again. And we're just honored he just was reelected. How about a round of applause for that? So we have 4 more years of his fierce watchdog, but he does call it down the middle. And when he does an audit, the purpose of it is to improve. And we actually invite him in sometimes. But most importantly to me, he cares enough about this issue to take time out of his schedule and come share with you. So our Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale.
Good morning, everybody. Come on, we can do better than that. Good morning. Good morning. That's pretty good back there. I'm going to start off with this. Now, I played college football, and you're looking at me and you say, I bet he did not play the defensive line, and you would be correct. But our college football coach, and Secretary Wetzel knows this, when you're, and anyone else that played the game, whether high school, college, and if you're good enough, the pros, you get these inspirational messages and quotes on the locker room, or even in other sports, male, female, they put things on the locker room, coaches give you packages. There's one that I got in college that always stuck with me. Now, it was Coach Tucker put on the top of our locker room, the most important question in life is, what are you going to do now? So for football, it meant if you won, are you going to rest on your laurels, or are you going to get in there, get your treatment, watch your film, and try to get better the next week? If you lost, you're going to pout, you're going to sit around and say, woe was me, or you're going to try to get in the film room, get your treatment, start getting better. Now, I just want you to stick a pin on that question for a second. What are you going to do now? Secretary Wetzel gave a lot of statistics, and as the Auditor General, I deal with numbers every day. Now, it was said earlier, and I agree, I'm going to say this for 2 reasons, why Secretary Wetzel is the best corrections secretary in the United States. Number 1 is he is the only one in the entire nation that retweeted when I was talking about Auburn returning that missed the field goal, when Alabama tried to kick that field goal to win the game, and Auburn took it back and won, and I'm sitting there like on my Thanksgiving, it was a Friday after Thanksgiving, and I'm tweeting about this like, America, are you seeing this? The only corrections secretary in the United States that was retweeting my tweets about that was Secretary Wetzel. So he has a very solid place in my heart over that. Because if you're not retweeting my musings about Auburn and Alabama, then really you're missing out on something in life. But the second reason is, and significantly more important than that, although that was a lot of fun, was he is leading a national conversation and action to change those numbers. So now I'm going to come into my world for a second and give you the numbers. And I'm not going to talk about the 81,000, although obviously I just talked about it, that is the equivalent of the size of the city of Reading. That's just state. Throw in county and federal, you're probably getting close to 100,000, so you're probably getting to about the city of Erie. Put that into sort of a thought process for a second. That's a lot of kids. But those are the statistics on the kids. I'm going to give you the dollar figures for a second. I audit all state spending. That's my job. When I get up in the morning, that's what I do, and I love it. And I love it not just because it's about looking at the numbers, but it's about when you find problems, how do you make things better? So let me give you some numbers that we need to think about on how do we make things better. We spend about $10,000 to $14,000 per kid per year in our public education system. Okay? Some people think it's too low, some people think it's too high, some people think it's right down in the middle. But regardless of where you are in that discussion, that's about what we spend on average per year in Pennsylvania to educate a child. For incarceration, we spend on average close to $40,000 per incarcerated inmate per year. So, those are the numbers. Those are the two numbers of just pure dollar figure. So again, whether you think that 40,000 is too high, too low, or somewhere in the middle, the thing I always like to start people off is, just as a taxpayer, we'll go into the moral discussion in a second. Just as a taxpayer, where would you rather invest your dollars? Up front, giving kids a shot, or on the back end, where you're not really sure what your return on investment is? Now, I know there is a change of culture that is happening in corrections to try to make people more ready for society when they re-enter, and that is a critical function. But just on those two things, are we better off doing the former or the latter? And I would say it's the former. More kids, more opportunity. However, those two dollar figures aren't enough to get the full grip of the story. When somebody is incarcerated, it is not just about that dollar figure. There is a whole stream of events that go with that. Impact on the immediate family, friends, the kids, and the community at large. And you don't even get a grip on what those dollar figures are. But the thing that you really can't get a grip on financially is the impact on that child. Now, Secretary Wetzel talked a little bit about my story. I would say I was lucky on this side of the equation. That is, I was a little bit older, never had to worry about a meal on the table. There are issues that many kids have had to deal with that never confronted me as I and my family confronted this challenge. But there are still costs that happen to every child that goes through it. You don't know what the impact is of having emotionally a parent who isn't there, whether it be male or female. There are long-term consequences for that. So again, keep in mind the first question I told you, which was, what are you going to do now? Keep that in mind as I keep going forward on this. Those emotional costs, they have dollar figure too, but we don't really know what those are, the real cost of that. So the idea of having less people incarcerated not only is good for that individual who is incarcerated and the family, but the society at large. Because the less people that have to be incarcerated, it's good for taxpayers, it's good for families, it's good for communities. Now, I'm also going to tell you here, and not just saying this as an elected official, we all know there's some people that need to be incarcerated. There are people that make mistakes. And my dad, if he were up here to tell you, he needed to have some jail time to get his act together. But the importance of being able to then go back into society and making some lemonade out of the lemons. And for a long time, we lost that ability in Pennsylvania because our politics went in the wrong direction. Okay? Talk about mass incarceration. It becomes, I'm just going to tell you the pure, blunt part of politics. It is a lot easier to argue, lock them up and throw away the key in a 30-second commercial than compassion. It's a lot easier commercial to run. And because of those politics, there was one aspect of our state budget that rose every year for nearly 3 decades. And it wasn't protecting the environment. It wasn't educating children. It was our correction system. The only one that increased every year. Again, it's easier to explain why you're throwing more people away, but now there's this wake-up call that's happening on both the left and the right politically. And I want to say that again. It's happening on the left and the right politically. What in God's name have we done? So, what was that first question I told you at the beginning? What are you going to do now? As we move forward on this and that we continue to have discussions and educate people, I would be willing to bet a lot of money, and we're near the casino, but willing to bet a lot of money that the vast majority of all Pennsylvanians, people of faith, people of high intellectual caliber, people that have good jobs, and everywhere in between, have no idea that nearly 100,000 children in Pennsylvania have a parent incarcerated. And I guarantee you, if they knew that, they would be shocked. And it would help change the dialogue and the urgency on fixing this if people knew that. So, let me end where I began. What are you going to do now? Are we going to sit down and say, well, it's going to be too tough to change the culture on this issue, so we're just going to give up? Are we going to think people don't want to hear this story, so we're just not going to tell it? And that what are you going to do now? That's not for the people that are in here incarcerated, and that's not for the children of the incarcerated parent. That's for everybody else that believes in this issue and how we have to change the conversation, the tone, and the moral fabric of our communities by getting this to change, because the what are you going to do now is for everybody. Are we going to take the time to talk to state legislators, governors, members of Congress about what we believe needs to be done to change this issue? Are we going to go when somebody is incarcerated? Are we going to help that family member, that child? Are we going to work with the schools? Are we going to actually work to bring mental health challenges where they need to be, which is treated as something that is not the fault of the person with the mental health challenge, but actually an illness that needs to be treated? What are you going to do now? For me and for you, we've all had those what are you going to do now moments in life. For me, as Auditor General, I get to go out every day and talk about the actual numbers and then tell it into a story, part of it my story, part of it the Pennsylvania story, of how we need to change this because everyone says we need to do a better job of educating our children. And then at the same token, a lot of people will say, and understandably so, they don't want their taxes to go up. So to me, what's the best way to solve that? Less people in corrections facilities. More people not needing to come back, lowering recidivism rates. What will that do? That will, voila, free up more money to do the things that all of us can broadly agree to, which is doing a better job of protecting our environment, giving every kid a better shot at a good education. And the only way we get there is by the what are you going to do now moment. Sit around and think, it's going to be too tough, or we're going to work day by day to try to change it. I'm going to keep trying to do my part. I know Secretary Wetzel is, and I implore all of us to do that, regardless of where you sit or stand on this issue. Former Governor Bob Casey had this quote, and he said, "The ultimate test of any public official is, what did you do when you had the power? Because in our system of government, we don't have the power forever. We don't have kings and queens. And that's a good thing. So all of us on the public side, what do you do when you had the power? Do you do the hard work to change the culture? Or you sit back and just say, it's too tough, I'm going to ride this wave. And the same thing goes to everybody here. Each of you have power too. We have elections in this country. You have the power of the vote. You have the power of persuasion. You have the power to communicate with your elected officials. And you can talk about it from the moral faith side of this, of the family. You can talk about it from the taxpayer side of it. You could talk about it anywhere in between. But to me, it is absolutely crystal clear. If we want to have a better state and a better nation, we need to have less kids have incarcerated parents. Thank you very much.